Hi, my name's Petra and this is Petra Vintage Knitting, and today I'm going to be talking about quite a few different projects that I have that are knits from the 1930s through to the 1980s, and I've got a few different things on the needles. In fact, probably a lot more than I normally would, because beginning of the year I wouldn't say that I entirely got cast on itis, but I did decide to plan my knitting year a little bit ahead, which isn't something I normally do, but there were so many things that I wanted to make that I thought, no, I want to actually write out a list. So typically I would finish a project in around 6 weeks. I do just knit primarily jumpers, sweaters, cardigans in 4-ply yarn. So it does take me a little while to knit anything. But I did a quick calculation, and 52 weeks divided by 6 weeks comes to about 9 projects. So I decided to plan out 9 different projects. And then once I planned them all out, I just started casting them. And plus some of them were already works in progress as well. Now I did essentially run out of needles, but I'm considering casting on all 9 projects and having everything ready to go, because then I'm hoping that I'll have all 9 projects finished by the end of the year and I won't get distracted and start working on other things. Now, early in January, I finished this project, which I'm wearing. It's called Dundee. That was the original pattern, and it's in a patterns booklet, just Fair Isles. And the thing that I really liked about this one was I thought this could use, well, in the end I ended up buying yarn for it, but I actually thought this particular pattern would go really well with scrap yarns as well, because the body is essentially it's just dots of different colors with pearls in it, and then like the color work's fairly simple, so I didn't think it was going to be anything too complicated that I had to buy a lot of yarn for. But as it is, I purchased yarn. This is Jamieson and Smith Shetland wool, and the finished object looks quite a bit different from the original picture. So I'm thinking that because the original picture has quite a bit of stitch definition, it looks like it must have been using a fairly smooth type of wool, or it might have even been using a type of wool that had cotton in it. Because it is vintage, I don't think it would have been pure cotton. It was more common to have wool in the 40s. But yeah, just the look of it's really different. This Shetland wool tends to look quite fuzzy when it's completed and washed. And certainly the yarn that was used in the original just looks very crisp. Alrighty, so I did already do a whole episode talking about this, so I'm not going to talk about this project too much. But there's a few things that, so essentially I did make a few changes compared to the original pattern because I wanted to just make sure it fit me better. But in terms of fit, there's definitely some improvements that I'll make in my next project where I use this yarn and this type of pattern. One was that I felt that the body was a little bit big. There's a little bit of excess fabric on the back, and I like my projects to be fairly fitted. The other thing though, the original pattern actually had short sleeves and I turned it into long sleeves. And I don't think I did the best job actually of structuring the sleeves, because I felt that it was a bit too baggy here, and that was entirely my bad. I changed the rate of decreases, but I left it a little bit baggy here, and then it ended up being too tight down here, so I had to block it quite severely, and as a result my sleeves are a bit short. Although, as it turned out, for my birthday I purchased myself a book. Mary Mucklestone, I believe, was the author. I hope that's her name. I haven't got it in front of me. And they were saying that Fair Isle sweaters did typically have short, long sleeves, because when you're doing manual labour, you don't want to have your sleeves get caught in any machinery, or if you're doing fishing, like you don't want to get it caught in nets and things. So as it turned out, I knit my project exactly to how someone would have 100 years ago, or not necessarily 100, but 80 years ago. Yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else I can say about this other than what I said in the last video, but I did take some photos of it, and I discovered that my phone, which is a Google Pixel, takes horrible photos of this color. So I've got naturally grey eyes as well, like a blue grey, and it seems to apply some kind of filter on there when I take a photo, and the blue, this like turquoise blue, changed to a grey, and my eyes changed to a brown after the filter was put on in Pixel. But this isn't a filter that I put on, it's the filter that the actual camera puts on. And in fact, you can see when I look at the picture, I can see it shows the original picture, and then within a second you see it change, and that goes for a more saturated, I don't know if saturated's the word, but higher contrast picture. And when it goes for the higher contrast, it just completely changes the colors of the garments. I wasn't happy with my finished photo on Ravelry. Something else that I would do again, if I was to knit this exact pattern, I ended up having to cut. So I did do this with steeks. I steeked the arms and I steeked around the neck. But if I was to do this again, I would still make the neck even wider again. The neck in the pattern was way too tight. I could not actually get it around my neck. And I don't think I'm a thick-necked person, but I simply couldn't get it around my neck. It was choking me. So I ended up cutting on both sides of the neck and then picked up stitches around that. But still, when I wear it, it feels tight. It feels soft now around the neck, because in order to make sure that I didn't drop stitches, I needle felt steeked that neckline. So where I've got the needle felting, it's gone kind of fuzzy, and so it feels soft, which is actually quite nice. But it's just still too tight around the neck, and I think I would have rather have it start a little bit wider and maybe go a little bit deeper. But it would have taken away some of this nice striping if I'd done that. I'm also not sure if maybe I made it slightly wide on the shoulders. The seam is actually sitting on the shoulders rather than in a little. So next time I might reduce the width of this portion, but we're really only talking about a centimetre or two. We're not talking about large changes, and different people have different opinions on this as well, because some people prefer a bit more ease. I prefer things to be, when it comes to my tops, I prefer them to be fairly tight. That's the only real reason why I'm saying that. But I'm definitely looking forward to wearing this in winter. I haven't worn it yet. I mean, I'm feeling a bit hot now. It's 35 degrees Celsius today, and I just put this on now for the video. I'm going to be getting a little bit hot. Anyway, I think I'll be fine though. I do actually find I have no trouble knitting or wearing knits throughout summer, because our house is heavily air conditioned, and we just have the air conditioning on permanently. So we just set a timer throughout the day for what the temperature is, and my husband set our house for 22 degrees. And I've always been a bit of a cold person, so for me 22 degrees is just maybe 2 degrees colder than I'd like, and so I'm typically wearing my knitwear and woolly boots around the house even in the middle of summer. But if I do go out, then I do actually like wearing still knitted t-shirts in summer, even if I go out, if they're knit with a loose enough gauge, but not something like this Shetland wool, because when I washed and blocked it, it did, like, the fibres hold on to each other and there's no real kind of gaps where air can flow. Shetland wool is obviously designed for cold weather, because it's fairly cold in Shetland and the sheep know how to keep warm. So it's good for keeping warm, not so good for Australian summer. Anyway, so I have more projects that I've planned out though. I was really happy to have this one finished, and I've got some notes about which things I wanted to finish this year. And so I'm in no specific order. I'm just going to go through the ones on my list. So the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to finish my, I'll bring it up again. I wanted to finish this project here, which that original one, it's from the 1980s. That one was in DK weight, and I wanted mine in 4-ply weight. I wanted it to be large enough that I could wear it over a jumper in winter. So I wanted the sleeves to be fairly wide, but I liked that deep V design because I thought then if I wear another wool, like if I wear one of my wool t-shirts, I'll be able to see that t-shirt underneath the cardigan. So I really like that idea. Now I have been making many learnings actually from this project. I don't want to be negative and say that it's been pretty horrible, but learning, oh no, I've got the wrong bag. I've been learning a lot. So actually this project with the deep V is the first time I've ever done a steek. So I ended up steeking this one, but this was my first steek. This one is really close to being a finished project, but I made a few mistakes and now I've had to, I'll tell you what I've done. So, so this is what it's looking like at the moment, which is quite a bit different from when I last showed it to you, because I don't know if you saw any previous episodes, but it used to be blue. So we'll go into how it is not blue in a minute, but I have done the majority of it. I've sewed up the sleeves, I've added the button band, and overall I'm really happy with the project. I didn't pay exactly attention to how it should be finished, and when I added the button band, so that's, I don't know if you can see, button band, I've got basically a cable running down the button band. I did add the button bands to the back piece, and then I found that it was curling a bit at the back, so I put a tiny little bit of rib across the top to stop it from curling, which wasn't, I don't know if that was in the pattern, but because I basically re-gauged everything and then haven't referred to the pattern ever since. But yeah, what did I do wrong? So one thing you might notice if I put this on, it's so hot today and now I've got 2 layers. Oh goodness. I'm just having to undo a bit of wool here that I'm using to hold stitches on because I ended up cutting off the bottom of my sleeves. Now I actually knit these bottom up, and it was looking fine when I was trying it on, but then I blocked it and it turned out that it was way too big. I cut 4 repeats off my cable, and now it's sitting at, I haven't put the ribbing on here yet, but now it's sitting at that bone before my hand, whereas previously it was finishing like the middle of my knuckles, and I'm like, no, that wasn't quite what I had intended. I had actually chosen, I wanted it to be a long sleeve, like proper long sleeves, and I wanted it to be mid-hand because I had intended to wear this in winter, but down to my knuckles wasn't the intention. It just looked too big in the sleeves. But the other thing that I had done was recently I've been sewing up a lot of my knits with actual thread instead of wool. The reason being, I feel that sewing thread is stronger. I've had a few times when I've sewed up with wool and then the seaming's broken, particularly if I use mattress stitch, which used to be the way that I seamed. Now I use back stitch because I find back stitch is sturdier, and so I'm assuming it's less likely to break. Once I started using back stitch, I also started using sewing thread, because the thing about back stitch is if you make a mistake, it's because it's a sturdier seam, it can be a bit harder to undo if you make a mistake. So once I started using sewing thread, I found that if I made a mistake, I could quite easily differentiate the sewing thread from the wool, and I could then snip it and pull it out. And if you seam properly, it shouldn't be visible anyway. But this particular project, now I haven't said anything about the yarn, but I had knitted with 2 strands of soft wool from Colormar, which were both lace weight, and 1 strand of cobweb weight cashmere silk. The cobweb weight cashmere silk was white, and then the yarn that I had knitted with, the body was knit in blue, and the sleeves were knit in red. And initially it was all going to be red, but then I ran out of red wool and I went with this two-tone look. But in both cases I had held the cashmere silk blend alongside it. And the reason why I had done that was, first of all, I had knit a previous project in that yarn combination so I could measure the gauge. Still, I have no idea how I ended up with the sleeves too long. Obviously, maybe I just did some maths wrong or something. But, so I already knew what the gauge was going to be if I held it like that, which was a benefit to me because I didn't need to swatch. But the other reason was that I really liked the finished result, because you end up with this marl when you over dye the garment, where you've got, I don't know if you can see that, it's just a really subtle, doesn't want to focus, it's just a really subtle marl, because you've got that silk running through, but it's it doesn't, maybe that actually probably looks a bit more severe, but when you actually look at it, it just looks really, really subtle because I've over dyed it all the same colour. I'll tell you a little bit about the overdying in a minute, because it was a real surprise to me that the blue turned out this colour, because now I've got, I don't know if you can see, so that's the sleeves are still the red, and the other part of it is a bit darker because it used to be blue. Every time I record a podcast I end up sneezing, and then the second half of my podcast I've got the sniffles, so I really apologise if that happens. I've just got up and blown my nose, so hopefully no sniffing. Anyway, yeah, so you could see there's a slight difference in colour, and it's a lot less than it was before, because before it was actually blue and red. But yes, I was talking about the seaming. So the thing about the seaming was I had used thread, and I didn't really think it through, because I just picked up some thread that I happened to have lying around, which was a light grey colour. And it didn't occur to me, because normally when I seam, the seaming isn't visible anyway, so I probably should have still matched the colour, but it's not normally visible. But when it comes to doing the button bands, for the first button band, I realised that it would be sensible to use the wool because it might show up on the front of the garment. So with this one, this side here, I've seamed it. I essentially knit the button band as a long, thin piece of fabric, and I've doubled it over. And so I had the cable on one side, and the other side I just had plain. I knit that side on with wool, but then I put it down for a while and I completely forgot about it, and then I seamed this side with the actual thread. And the problem was, because I had that cobweb weight cashmere silk in there as a marl, and when I was knitting with it, it was white, I couldn't see that this was showing up on the front of the garment. So if you look up close, I don't know if it wants to focus. I don't know if anyone can even see that. But essentially, there's come on, focus. Maybe I don't know, but you can see there's like white spots there, and basically you can see the thread at the front, which is really bugging me. I can't wear it like this because it's going to bother me so much. So, but I don't have any of the exact same wool because I over dyed it. And so there was no other wool that was going to be exactly the same, and I couldn't over dye it twice because the wool's still going to be a different colour compared to everything else. If I use the original wool, which was bright red, that wouldn't work out. So because my sleeves were like literally up to here, what I decided to do was cut the end of the sleeves off. So now I have 2 sleeves that I've cut. I've like literally just cut them off because I knit them bottom up and I didn't think I could unravel. And that was the most stressful thing I think I've ever done. I did not enjoy doing that. And one thing that I learned was if you'd already seamed the sleeves, don't try and be a hero and cut them when they're still seamed. You need to unseam it first, because what I discovered was, especially when you do back stitch as opposed to mattress stitch, sometimes the seaming isn't perfectly aligned. And so it wasn't perfectly aligned. I cut it and it turned out that I ended up cutting into a couple of rows that I was trying to keep. I'd already tried to pick up the stitches using some wool, just some scrap wool, pick up all the stitches using a needle before I cut. But then I discovered that I had already cut a couple of rows above in one spot. Also, it was really hard picking up the pearls. I don't think that I did it correctly. And when I cut it, it unraveled a bit. So that was really stressful, and it was late at night as well because we were watching TV and it wasn't a good TV project. I just stared at this the whole time, really stressed out, and kind of picked it up the best that I could. I knew that I'd be able to just pick up the remaining stitches with a crochet hook anyway, but it wasn't that easy for me to control where I ended up stopping. So when I've picked up, I've now done the same for the other sleeve. I cut that one as well, and it's ended up at a slightly different position compared to the first one. So I'm now going to have to go back and knit a little bit more to get it to the same spot on both sleeves. And I've started knitting, just knitting the cuff like that. And so it's almost done now, but I'm also going to have to unpick the whole button band on one side, only on one side luckily, and re-seam it with the wool that I've rescued from cutting the sleeves off at the bottom. Since there was excess fabric there anyway, there'll be more than enough leftover fabric after I've redone the ribbing to seam that button band on, and I'll remove the light coloured thread. And then it'll be ready to wear, and I'm looking forward to this one being finished because I think it's going to be a really practical item. There is another thing that I learned, and that is not to seam the garment together when it's unblocked, because in this case I figured that as long as everything was unblocked it would be fine and it would shrink or stretch at the same rate, but that wasn't actually true in this case because my button band is quite rigid. It's doubled over and it's got a cable in it, and that cable's holding it really tight, whereas the rest of it is just plain stockinette. And when I wear it, I mean, it looks fine here, but when I wear it, it is a little bit higher at the front and a little bit longer at the back, which isn't necessarily a problem because, you know, you actually see that sometimes the fashion to have jumpers that are a little bit longer at the back. And yeah, it's okay, but it just bunches slightly when I wear it as well. And so if I had realised that, I might have actually have knit the button band like a centimetre or two longer, and then when I blocked it, then it would have all been the same length all the way around. But we will see when it's actually finished. Overall, I've tried it on and it fits quite nicely, other than the issue that I had with the sleeves. So I'm confident that I'm going to be happy with this project and it's going to get some use. Okay, so the next thing that I was working on was, once I finished working on this top, I wanted to cast on again using more of the Shetland wool that I had purchased, since I purchased a whole bunch of it before Christmas. And for my birthday, which was in January, my mum made me this bag. She ran out of this fabric with the birds on it, and so it's just plain on the back. But it's got the birds on the front for pockets and on the inside as well. I think that I would rather have plain fabric on the inside because sometimes it's a bit hard to find a crochet hook, but it's essentially got the birds on the inside too. And I decided that I wanted more thero in my life, and I designed my own project that was going to fit my body measurements well, taking into account that I found this one to be a little bit big. Now, as it turned out though, I ended up having to frog this one back and start over because I did knit it a little bit too small, given that this one's actually all over Fair Isle and it's not terribly stretchy. So I want it to be fairly form-fitted. So what I've decided to do is actually put a zip in, and so now I've cast it on again with a steek. And so I'm going to have a zip that runs pretty much along the side like you would with a dress, and it won't be for the whole garment. It'll just be where it's really narrow, because the narrowness was I was having a little bit of trouble getting over my shoulders at the point where the waist was the smallest. But essentially I designed this pattern myself, and this is how it's looking. But I've made a couple of other mistakes with this, and because I've never done an all over Fair Isle before, this is my first time knitting any garment really in an all over Fair Isle. And other than having to start it again and add a steek, there were a couple of other things that I did. One was I didn't really know how to catch the floats when there were sections that were longer than 5 or 6 stitches. And what I discovered was the technique that I was using wasn't really the best. You can sometimes see the blue. I don't know, can you guys see that at all? Sometimes you can see the blue like poking through, but I have been given some advice that if it does poke through, try just pulling it from the back. I have given it a go and I don't think that it's entirely successful. I did watch a video on YouTube about how to secure the floats at the back, and I think probably the one that I looked at wasn't the best tutorial because it just sometimes shows on the front. Since then, I asked for some advice on Facebook, and I was shared a different YouTube video by Roxanne Knits. It showed a different method for securing the floats that does not cause any of it to show at the front. And since then I've been using that method exclusively, and I'm not seeing it in the front anymore. So when it comes to here, this one here, there's some blue dots, but up here there isn't. Now there was one other thing that I did incorrectly here, and I was considering, do I frog it again or not? Because I'd already frogged the bottom section, and I wasn't planning to frog the whole thing, but I was really having trouble picking up again at an earlier point when it came to the colourwork. I didn't realise, but because you've got the stranded colourwork, it behaves a bit like if you knit it twice. And so when you rip back, you're ripping back one thread or the other, sorry, one yarn or the other, but you have to pull on both of them, and depending on where you rip back to, some of the stitches will have been made, and some of them where it was a float, it might have actually dropped a row. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I just found it incredibly hard to frog back, and I gave up. I tried so many times to stop and pick up my stitches onto the needle again, and I couldn't work it out, so I just frogged back to the beginning. And then when I got up to this second orange stripe, I realised that I had made a mistake, and I had knit this stripe here a little bit too thin, and it was supposed to be 2 rows of orange, 2 rows of like this white colour, and then 2 rows of orange again, and I'd only done 1 row of orange, 2 rows and then 1. And so that entire row, or that entire section of 4 rows, which should have been 6, is now going to look different from the whole rest of the garment. So I was very tempted to frog it all back again, especially since you could see the blue coming through. But I just didn't want to because I'd already frogged it. And I just figured I'll put it down to learning. I don't think it's going to be a massive thing because it is at the bottom. I'm going to put it down to learning, and next time I will have the right wrapping technique for the wrapping the floats. And I will be more observant and not make a mistake like that. So yeah, I will have one stripe that's different from everything else. And what it will mean is that these shapes here that go over those stripes will be, this one here is going to be shorter than all the rest because there's another 2 rows that we're missing. Anyway, so I actually designed it myself. Do I have the pattern somewhere? Yeah, so I actually designed this one myself. And what I like to do is I like to just plan out actually the whole pattern and put it on a piece of paper, and I just use this when I'm knitting it. I don't use written instructions or anything like that. I could have just charted just one part of the chart, but I like having the whole thing there because then when I have my shaping, then I will know where I'm going to be increasing. And for this one, I did something a little bit strange. I planned it so that the front part wouldn't have any shaping at all. It's completely square. And then all the shaping's going to be in the back. So my back looks like that. I might have shown that to you last time. And yes, that did have the side effect though of the fact that the garment itself was a bit too tight. But now that I've got the steek, it'll be fine because essentially there's not a lot of stretch in that. But yeah, it'll be fine with a steek in there, I'm sure. So I've spent a couple of weeks on this now and I'm really happy with it, and I can't wait for it to be finished. It's not going to have sleeves, it's just going to be a sleeveless vest, so I'm thinking it shouldn't take that long. But I really love these colours together, and I guess the reason why I designed this one was I just liked these colours and I wanted to find somewhere to use the colours. And so what I did was I just went online and found an XO motif. I used the software to create the chart. I just pasted the motif in and then repeated it. I did find that according to my shape, I didn't have quite the right number of stitches, so I ended up making this one in the middle a bit narrower. I don't know if you can see, but it's narrower here. I did get some advice from a Facebook group that does a lot of Shetland knitting to next time put the narrow motifs on the side instead of in the middle, but I don't mind it in the middle. I think that's just a personal preference thing, really. The other thing was on the back, I didn't want lots of incomplete shapes. So on the sides here, I just added a different shape, which I think is going to be fine. We'll find out. So that's that project. I'm excited about that one. Okay, there's a project that's next on my list that I have not cast on. But I can insert picture, and I saw this jumper actually on a podcast called Emily Kate Made This, and it's from a German pattern, but it's actually a Norwegian star motif that's being used as an all-over pattern along with a lice pattern. So in Norway, they'd call it like a lusekofte if it, I can't speak Norwegian, sorry, I've probably just butchered that. But basically that's like a lice jacket when you use dots throughout. And so this particular pattern has the dots on the bottom half, and then it has an all over motif, which is the Norwegian star. or a Norwegian style pattern. Obviously you can have quite a few of them. And ever since I saw it, I loved it. And so I've been kind of hassling Emily Kate made this to give me the pattern, because I'm like, oh my god, I really want to knit that. I love it. I had been looking for a pattern like that, just like that one, for ages, like looking around. I've joined a few different groups. So on Facebook, I joined a kofta gruppa, which is it's mostly Norwegian, I believe. But I hadn't found one that was a vintage one that had the right kind of shaping and the right aesthetic that I was looking for. And then when I saw that one, I'm like, that's it, that's the one. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm going to cast that one on soon. I'm also going to use Shetland wool for this, but I don't have enough needles at this stage. If I'm going to cast everything on, I need enough needles to do that, and at this stage I don't. Alright, so that's a to come. Alright, so the next thing that I've been working on as well is project using DK weight wool and mohair. And so this one's been coming along. Just trying to work out which is the front and which is the back. I've been a little bit worried about this one though, because it looks like it's going to be a bit small. Like, it looks midget sized when I hold it up like this, but it is going to stretch. So, and I tend to have a habit of knitting things too big, and so I wanted to actually make things too small. Well, no, I didn't want to make it too small, but I wanted to make it small so that it was going to be form-fitting. I wanted it to have negative ease, but this looks like really too small. It's like, it would make a good cow, wouldn't it? But I mean, the intention was it was going to stretch. The only thing is, I based the gauge on a swatch that I did, and I did the swatch in Stockinette, and I thought, well, that's okay. This pattern is basically a rib anyway. But something that I failed to consider was that between the ribs, these bars, I didn't know how they were made, and the bars are basically made by going backwards 6 stitches and then pulling some yarn out and then like wrapping that bar over the stitches and then knitting that. And what that means is that you can't really pull it horizontally too much without those bars getting really tight. And so there's only so much lateral stretch that this project will have. So what I'm thinking of doing, if it turns out that it's just too small, I'm thinking of making the front pieces a little bit larger than the back piece, and it just means that the seams won't be perfectly on the side. The seams will be on my back a little bit. But once I realized that that was an issue, I adjusted my pattern slightly so that I would have more stitches at the underarms. And I think, yeah, if I try that on now, the number of stitches I have is perfect for the underarms. It's just the waist that might be a bit tight. And so if I'm going to be making the front wider, I'm only going to be doing that at the bottom and not by the time I get to the underarms. So I just need to kind of figure out that maths and plan that a bit better before I do the fronts. But it's coming along, and because it's DK weight, it's quite fast. So I haven't spent a lot of time on this, and it's already coming along quite nicely. The original pattern called for a bulky yarn, but by doing DK weight and mohair together, it did bulk it out, but it still wasn't, as the gauge was still smaller than the bulky weight yarn used in the pattern. So I did have to redesign it a little bit to make it have more stitches. Alright, well, that one's coming along anyway. And, oh, I forgot to say, did I? I did say what the previous cartons were knit with. So I believe that the last one I talked about was Jamieson & Smith. The Deep V one was the Colour Mart. I know I said that. This one here is knit with Knit Picks. Oh, I say this wrong every single time. I can remember. I think it's Hawthorn. But then I might be saying Hawthorn and it's actually something else. 1 minute. I don't know what it is. I can never ever remember the name of this yarn. Hawthorn. It is Hawthorn. So DK weight Hawthorn, which was bare, and I overdyed it myself, and then a long avec and a silk mohair in the châtain colorway. I'm knitting it with a 4.5mm needle, but it doesn't really matter because my gauge and your gauge are probably completely different. Alright, so there's only a couple more things. So the next thing that I want to knit, I haven't cast on yet, and ever since I saw it, this is actually another one that Emily Kate made this particular pattern. We seem to have a really quite a bit of a crossover in terms of what we like, because when I saw this one as well, I had to have it. It's the Serenade Star, and I am using navy and beige color mark wool. It's actually going to be the exact same wool as this. Oh, I just realized I didn't tell you about over dyeing it. I'm so sorry. So I'm going to have to go back and talk about this now. Over dyeing. So I discovered a really exciting way of over dyeing yarn, which I discovered in my previous project using the same wool as this, which was something I knit last year. It was a t-shirt and it had false cables throughout it, and it knit up exactly the same with that mild look. And what I discovered was and this was an accidental discovery, but it was an exciting one because it works really well. But if you mull some yarns together and then put them in a soak bath with a whole lot of laundry soaker, like the type that you use for soaking baby nappies back in the 60s and 70s when people were using just those terry square cloths. I don't know, does anyone actually use soaker on modern cloth nappies? I mean, I guess probably you would for modern cloth nappies as well. But anyway, or stain removal in general. But if you put a whole lot of that, and I also put in just laundry powder, just regular laundry powder, put a whole lot of that in the water with the garment, it loses dye, because these types of laundry powders, they're alkaline in nature, and protein, which wool and silk are, they set dye when you have acid, and they release dye when you have alkaline. So if you've ever if you've ever tried washing your woolens in any kind of detergent, you might have seen that you lose a lot of dye, especially reds and blues. They lose a lot. And so I would normally, if I was washing my woolens, I would normally hand wash them in a bucket of cold water, because I don't want to lose the dye. But if you want to intentionally lose the dye, you can do something exciting. So like I said, I soaked this with a whole lot of laundry soaker and laundry powder in water, and then, well, essentially I put everything in my slow cooker. It's an old slow cooker that we do not use for food. I've got a sticker on it that says no food, so that no one ever feels tempted to eat from it. But essentially I put it all in there, set it to automatically increase the temperature from cold to hot, let it do its thing. Because it's a slow cooker, it's not bubbling away very fast. Make sure that it's all covered in water, and then when I come back to it, the dye from the wool has leaked into the water, and there's still some attached to the garment, but essentially it's leaked into the water and turned into a garment coloured dye bath, which then dyes all the yarns that you've mulled together the same colour, which I just love it. It's I was so excited when I discovered that it worked like that. So now if I want to have a homogeneously coloured jumper and I've got scrap yarn, I know that I can mull them all, do that, and it's going to turn out pretty much like a tonal yarn. So I did this, and so the back was blue, the sleeves were red like I said, and both the sleeves and the main part of the garment have now changed to a bluish reddish burgundy, and the cobweb weight yarn has changed to the same color. Now, the thing is though, you don't want to keep it like that because you do still need to set the yarn. So once it's come up to the hot temperature and you've just let it stay in there for a little while, and once you can see that, basically you turn off the heat, you can see that the water that it's in is going to be whatever the color is of your yarn. I then stick a whole bunch of vinegar in that pot, and that then sets the dye back into the garment. The interesting thing about that is when you add vinegar plus alkaline, you get, well, not an explosion, but you get a lot of fizzing. So if you put the vinegar in, it starts to fizz up. So you don't want to have the water overflowing. Like you don't have it right at the top of your pot, because essentially it starts to really fizz up. But yeah, it forms a lot of foam, and but it's okay because the objective really is just to get it from alkaline to acid, and it doesn't harm the wool in any way. So I did that, just let the vinegar sit in the hot water with the garment, swished it ever so slightly, didn't want to agitate it, and after it had cooled down enough, I just tipped all the water out and it was this colour. So very happy with that. I'm definitely going to use that technique again. This is the second time now that I've done that. And actually, I do have a project, an old project, that the yarn was never set well by the dyer. It's turquoise, and turquoise apparently doesn't set very well. I have used that technique to good success with that project as well. So I guess it's now the third time I've used it. And what I did in that case was I just soaked it in some powder. The water did change that turquoise colour. I added a whole lot of vinegar, and then when I finished washing the garment was a lot bluer than it had been before, because it's taken some dye out of all of the garment but then put it back onto the surface. So it's almost like it's recycling some of the dye from the inside of the yarn. I don't know exactly how it works, but it ended up being bluer after I did that than before. So it was amazing. I'm really happy with it. So yes, sorry to go backwards and talk about something I'd already talked about. Okie dokie. So the same yarn as that project, which is the Colour Mart soft wool lace weight, is what I'm going to be using when I do the Serenade Star, but I don't have enough needles, so I can't cast it on. Alright, I do intend to finish this project, which it's still in exactly the same place as I last left it. No change since I last listed this one in a video. It just, yeah, because I knit this one on straight needles with a knitting belt, I can't take that one in the car with me, and so it hasn't been my preference. I've gone back to just knitting with circulars again, and I haven't really wanted to get the needles out, but I do want to finish the project. I might even finish on my circulars. It just means though that I'd have a bit of a line potentially. It could block out, or I could just finish the front with the straight needles and then go for circulars for the back. Right, and the next one on my list, I don't have cast on yet, but I'm planning to make a lace project using some Japanese linen that I purchased when I was in Japan last year. And the pattern that I've picked for that, it's called Lavender 352 Maple Leaf. It might be Maple Leaf Jumper. Just Maple Leaf. And actually, I just saw someone knit that up recently on Facebook, in a Facebook group that I'm in, which just made me all the more determined to knit it, because she said that she managed to do the back in 2 days. I couldn't believe it. But yeah, it's a really beautiful lace top, and I like wearing knits in summer. So I'm happy wearing wool in summer, but this one's in linen as well, and it'll be even better for summer. Alrighty. I do have some yarn that I want to use that I have not planned anything for, and it's some burgundy possum yarn, but actually I have not planned that one at all. But I would also, I've just got one more project, and this one is on the needles, but I just realised that I forgot something. I'll just get something. Alright, so late last year I knit a blue stripy top from a 1940s pattern using some old yarn that I had from stash that had been damaged by moths. And so this yarn ended up all in small balls, and some of the bits were a bit threadbare, so I've had to kind of break the yarn. Now I've still got a whole lot of little balls of this in some colours that I liked together as well. So I've got all these little, these are the bigger ones. I've used the smaller balls first, but I have this burgundy yarn. It's Rowan. It's a Rowan Baby Merino 4-ply. It's a superwash wool, and it's discontinued. So there's no point in me talking about that one too much, but I just really like the colours it comes in. And so I've decided to cast on a project for this one. It's going to be a yoked jumper, and I've got just a bit done with that. But with it, there's going to be some contrast colours. And these are the contrast colours that I decided on. I've got red and 2 shades of yellow. And so the pattern that I picked for is actually a Stitchcraft 1934 jumper on the cover. And it's got bows on it and stripes and, what else can you say? Bows and stripes and stash yarn. So it's going to be basically a fairly simple project, and it's definitely a good one for card knitting. It's quite, you know, it's basically stockinette. I needed a stockinette project that I could just work stockinette on. And if it turns out that I finish this project before everything else, then I might end up casting on another project in addition to the 9 that I've listed out, just so that I have another stockinette project. Because stockinette really comes in handy sometimes. You just need stockinette. And I'm looking forward to having those balls of yarn out of my stash. I've still got a lot more of that yarn, but there will eventually have to be an end to that yarn. Oh, now something I forgot to say. One of my, so I did mention the bag that my mum made me for my birthday that had the birds on it. But my mum kind of said to me, or indicated that she might be willing to make a second bag. And I got a bit excited because I thought, oh, I want to pick my own fabric. And so I picked this fabric and I made this bag. Well, she made it for me. Thanks, Mum. But yeah, essentially I've got this nice taupe coloured stripe and then Australian flowers. And this time we've got both sides have the same pockets. It's not 2 different colours, and I asked for the inside to actually be the light coloured so that I can see my project rather than having dark coloured in there. And essentially both of them are a drawstring bag. The other drawstrings were a bit easier than this one because I picked drawstrings that were a little bit irritating, but it's a drawstring bag. You just tie a bow there, and so there's no zips or anything to worry about that might catch yarn. Yeah, and they're perfect size for knitting jumpers. They've got handles, so you can go out. And yeah, I really wanted something that I could fit my jumpers in because all the other bags that I'm using are all much smaller and they just weren't fitting. So I had a lot of projects not in bags. Now I'm happy that everything's organised into bags. Alrighty, well I think that's pretty much it. I can't think of anything else that I wanted to talk about. Hopefully next time I will have the burgundy one finished. I'm really looking forward to that. And essentially this year it's going to be working on the same projects most likely because I think I've planned out enough things that by the end of the year I'll be finishing the last of these ones. But you know, I might go buy some needles and just cast everything on. That sounds like fun too. Alrighty, well, nice to get a chance to chat with you today. I would really love to hear more about what projects you're working on. Are you working on vintage projects too? Please fill me in. Was there anything that I'm working on that you really like or that you would like some more information on? I'm not the most organized when it comes to describing things, so is there anything that I left out that you wanted to know? Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.